I was 6. I lived in a small village in Somalia, and it was something that was known. It was common. It was common knowledge that every girl in the village was going to be cut. But at the time, we didn't know it as female genital mutilation. I knew it as guditan, which means female circumcision. The way that it was presented to us was more like we were getting our ears pierced for the first time. That's what it felt like. And we were so excited, and it was something new. And although we didn't experience it or see anyone who experienced it, everyone who has gone through the procedure was telling us how amazing it was. I had it last week. It was great. You're going to be a woman. You're going to be more respected. And girls who did not have it done were shamed. They could not go to school peacefully. They couldn't play outside peacefully. Even their own families would take digs at them just for having a clitoris. For me, it was at the front of my grandma's house, and there was a woman sat on like a really small chair, and we were wondering, okay, this is exciting. And there was a few family members there, and it was just the three of us. No other kids were there. And then my little cousin, who was 5, went first, and she went happily to the chair, because I don't think any of us expected things to go down the way that it did. And the moment she sat on the chair, they just started grabbing. One was grabbing the hand, the other was grabbing a leg, one was grabbing the other leg, another hand. And it was just all these adult family members, my uncle, my aunties, my grandma, were holding her down. And the cutter took a double-sided razor and she put it to her skin. The screaming was getting louder and louder because she's a 5-year-old child who's being held down by her most closest family members. I think her dad was one of the people holding her down. And we had to watch that. And when they were done, they put her legs together, tied it with a cloth. And then I was dragged to the same chair that my cousin, 5-year-old cousin, just bled on. And it just sat there. And I was dragged to the seat, and they started doing the exact same thing. They were grabbing me. Everyone had a limb. I was confused. I didn't know what was happening. It was painful. A razor cutting through your human flesh without any painkillers, without any anesthetics, crying. And the same people that are meant to help you are the same people that are pushing you down with all their strength, with all their might. And then it was just my whole entire body went into shock, because before then I was fighting, but it got to a point where I couldn't fight anymore. The pain overpowered my body. But to sew, and this is a needle that they're using to physically sew somebody completely shut and leave what you consider reasonable holes for things as basic as urination, a hole all the way down to where the vaginal opening is, a tiny hole for a young girl's menstrual cycle, her period flow to come out. Things that are meant to be natural have become extremely painful. So once they were done sewing, I think I was the first one to want to urinate, because my body knew something happened. And it said, let's try and see if we could go to the toilet. And then the stinging, oh my God, I can't describe it. The pain of a wound that has just been cut and sewn together, and you're urinating for the first time. And then from that moment on, the idea of urination, of just going to the toilet, used to scare the daylights out of me, because I used to think, okay, but if I pee, I'm going to be in pain for the next few hours. And then you have to pee again in a few hours. And to think every single woman in that village has had this procedure done. Every single one, from the grandma to the little baby. It was really, really scary. But because it was a social norm, none of us questioned it. No one ever said, this is wrong, this feels wrong, this isn't right, this doesn't look right. No one said anything. And then we came here to the UK, and I got my period when I was 9 years old. So it was a very unlucky streak. I freaked out and I thought I was going to die, because we don't talk about periods. I didn't know what it was. I was never told to expect it. Obviously, I cried and I screamed, and my mother, jokingly said, this is normal, you're a woman now. But when she said that, it took me by surprise, because the reason why FGM was done to me is because I was supposed to become a woman. I was like, what the fuck? I thought I was a woman. How am I just becoming a woman now? And definitely not at 9. I could barely stand. I could barely walk. I could barely eat. Sometimes I would throw up just because of the pain, because the blood had nowhere to come out. The hole that they deemed fit was not big enough for a normal period flow. The pain was doubled, and I never want to ever feel like that ever again. And I remember I used to end up in the emergency room almost every single month. And every single month they would tell me I'm just having really bad belly cramps. No one was helping to make it make sense. So I was labeled as the sick child. So I went to the doctors and they explained to her that my period had nowhere to come out from. And because it was just sealed scar tissue, she said that it started like piercing through my skin, like trying to find a way out. Mm-hmm. And there was other blood that was also accumulated a little bit over time. And this is from 9 to 14. So even the ripping, it wasn't like a lot, it was a tiny bit. So I went back to Somalia, and there's this culture, toxic, very harmful culture that we have, is basically to reculture. So I used to hear it quite a lot. And it's basically when a child is deemed to westernize and they are plucked right out of America, Canada, Europe, the UK, and they are sent back to Somalia or other countries, and they are held against their will. They are falsely imprisoned. They have their passport confiscated, and they are not only tortured but tormented. I thought that this reculturing practice that we had was very meaningful, and it was about getting to know your people and your land. So I was really excited with the idea. So I approached my mom and I said, this is what I want to do. And bear in mind, this was the end of 2010, December 2010. My mom took a few weeks until she agreed, and I left end of December, straight from London to Dubai. And then we stayed 2 weeks in Dubai, and then we went from Dubai to Somalia. My mom could not stay with me, and I knew that already. I didn't expect her to stay with me because I thought I had a strong family, relationship, and I really wanted to believe that I would be protected and well looked after because everyone loved and respected my mom. So I was picked up by my auntie, and she's a sweetheart. I stayed with her in a city called Bulabute for 3 to 4 months. And I experienced quite a lot of messed up things in just the short period of time that I was with her. Worst time to go to Somalia, because Al-Shabaab, the terrorist organization, controlled majority of Somalia at the time. When I got there, a few days hasn't even gone by when my auntie's like, oh, there's a tashir today, acted just in conversation. I'm like, I don't know what that is. You're going to have to, tell me what that is. And she goes, is when Al-Shabaab are punishing someone for a crime and everyone has to watch. I was like, what do you mean? It's like everybody has to watch. I did not leave when I was intended to leave. It's the same idea of reculturing. So I believe there's 2 types. So there's one where they just straight up take you under false pretenses. Your grandma's sick, someone's ill. Majority of American, Canadian, European, and UK children, young minors, adults, have been held at gunpoint now. This is what they're doing now. They're being held at gunpoint the moment they enter the airport, taken into facilities where they are being recultured. So they are teaching them the Quran through beating. They are being chained. If the facility is for girls, they would be sexually assaulted, molested. They would be raped. They would be medicated. They are treated like prisoners. And to be honest with you, nobody's doing anything about it. And that is the reason why I went to Somalia. So the way that it went for me, for some people, it goes that way as well, where you're left with a family member that your parent hasn't seen for over 15 years. They could be bitter. They might not be the same people that you left or you last saw. And often either way, whether they leave you with a family member or they lock you up in a facility, something bad is bound to happen if your family is not close knit, or if your mother or father does not stay with you. They tend to come back to either America, Canada, or Europe whilst their kids are abroad being abused and they have no idea. Because my mom had no idea. For me, when I got to Somalia, as tough as the first 3 months were, things turned into what I believe was hell for me, because I was picked up from my auntie's house by my uncle, who had really heinous intentions, all to do with financial greed. I was basically sold, to say the least, except my mother did not have the intentions of selling me, but my uncle did, except he kept all the money. He set up this whole idea of a wedding, and he wanted me to get married. It started almost immediately after I arrived at his house, a few weeks, maybe a week or two, and it was instant. The amount of times I heard you become a woman for so many different reasons. And every time I said no, no, no. But again, I had now no contact with my family. I could not just call my mother. I didn't have a phone. I was beaten for even suggesting someone else because I was being forced to marry my cousin. I tried to escape, but my uncle was really, really good at threatening people. And I was 17 and I felt like I was in a foreign country. So one of his threats was, I'm going to report you to Al-Shabaab and I'm going to get you locked up for being a Asi Walidin, which means someone who's bad to their parents. So that meant, for me, I understood that as you're going to get married and you can't say anything about it, because if you do, you'll be imprisoned for 3 months and you'll be with Al-Shabaab for 3 months. So I said, okay, I'm not about to risk my life. I shut my mouth and I thought, you're going to find a way out. You're going to find a way out. At 17, I was still trying to find a way out. There's no embassy. So I couldn't take a plane. I can't swim, so I can't take a ship. I can't go by car. So I was completely trapped. I had no phone access. And then came my wedding day that I had no idea was even happening. I got a random call from my father who basically said, congratulations, you're a married woman now. And I was like, what are you talking about? To be honest, I was too stunned to speak. So I hanged up on him. Then I was married off. There was a little party. To be honest, I was in a daze throughout the whole party. I wasn't myself. I was put into a room and I did not move from the position I was put in because I was in complete and utter shock. He had come in to the room. Bear in mind, I'm a virgin. I have FGM. I have never seen male genitalia in my life. And he just dropped skirt, the ma'awis, just dropped it to the floor. And he wasn't wearing anything under that. But I was still hopeful of finding a way to escape. Even though I was trapped in a room now with this man who is now considered my husband, and I was meant to be in that room for exactly 7 days, and that's your honeymoon stage where you can't leave to do anything. You eat in that room, you go to the toilet, you come back, you get ready for prayer, you pray in the room. You don't leave the room. He can, I can't. So I thought to myself, how can I delay what he wants, which was clearly. Then I came to the conclusion that I had only two choices. It was either be raped or just submit. Hopefully it would be less painful. It was going to be painful, but I didn't know what to expect because I never had it before. Then I tried. It was almost impossible because, again, I had that much. I was very petite, very slim. I still am very skinny, small built. And because I was in a compromising position, when I tried to get him off me, he just put his whole entire weight on my body and he raped me. It was actually one of they say the first night is the worst. It was by far pain I have ever experienced. I think it outdid the FGM itself because it was so much that was happening. Like my body was being controlled. I could no longer move it the way that I wanted to. I can't physically fight or scream because it's shameful. You know, anything is possible. So I was terrified. It happened another 3, 4 times. And then it got to a point where, because my whole entire body was in pain, and by then I could no longer urinate properly because of the internal trauma that he caused. So I went into the room one day and I said to him, if you touch me, I will kill you, and I would not care if I die. Like, I will actually kill you. And I don't know why, but he listened and he didn't touch me for, I think, 3 nights. And then once the 7 days was over, my uncle decided, yeah, I have all the money that I need. I extorted everything I can for my sister. I have no use for this one now. So I got kicked out. I had no access to any money. I had no access to a phone. My communication with my mother was limited. I barely had any conversations with my siblings. My father, none after I got married. Within weeks, because of the constant pain that I was in, out of every single month that I've been with that man, he didn't touch me for 3 days after I threatened to kill him. The moment we moved into that house, it began and it didn't stop. Constantly, every single night, being raped by my own cousin, my first. They refused to give me any medical attention. And on top of being sexually assaulted almost every night, he started physically beating me on top of that. So whenever I was in pain and I couldn't bend down to clean his clothes by hand, or whenever I refused to cook, he used to beat me. And then my mom sent him money to hire a maid. I couldn't physically do anything and I was getting beaten up. She was helping me out a little bit, but he would not want her in the house. He would want me to do it, but I don't want to do it. And I have a big mouth. And I know I should have feared for my life a little bit more, but my mouth the words would come out before I could have time to control my mouth, because I grew up in this country where we have freedom of speech. The final straw for me, I was woken up so early in the morning to go and get meat and vegetables from the market in order for me to cook. I said, okay, but can you go get it and I will cook? He said, no, you get up, get it, and cook, knowing I was in pain. But he would choose when I'm at my weakest to physically beat me up, not when, I'm okay, because I think he was scared that I would kill him. So I'm sat there cooking when I realized that we didn't have stock cubes. So I asked my cousin, can you please go and get it? And because I know the market is far, I thought, rest your eyes a little bit and your body. I remember I closed my eyes and I must have drifted off to sleep, but I woke up to this man physically on top of me. He started punching the moment I opened my eyes, and walks, just calmly just walks out of the door and closes it behind him. I barricaded myself inside the bedroom using all of my furniture just for me to just take it back out, because at that point I hated my whole entire existence. I hated everything that I stood for. I hated my whole entire family. I hated everything and everyone, and I honestly did not care whether I lived or died at that point. And I remember opening the door, going into the kitchen and trying to find a weapon, something to beat him up with, something, but he hid everything that I was just using, he hid. So me and my mother came up with a plan for me to escape to a city that's controlled by government, so that I had a better chance at returning back home. No one was allowed to know. I already owned hijabs, so it was a massive cloth, long sleeve. I was covered from head to toe, and my mother's advice was to act like the perfect wife so they don't suspect that you are running away or you're going anywhere. Just pretend like, you're sorting things out. After my mom spoke to him, he allowed me to go to the hospital. But I wasn't really going to the hospital. That was staged so that I can get on a bus and leave. So I had a friend at the hospital. I went to her and I said, if anyone comes looking for me, just say she just left. I don't care what time it is. I said, she just left. So then they would think that I'm still there and they don't have time then to make calls. But the journey from Marka to Mogadishu is a long journey in itself. It's a few hours. From checkpoint to checkpoint, I arrived in the capital of Somalia safely through prayer and hope and prayer, begging God, I will never do anything bad in my life. Please save me. And he listened, he answered my prayers, and I got to Mogadishu 2 weeks later. 2 to 3 weeks later, I returned back to the UK. I remember returning the 12th of February 2012. Whilst on the plane, I was told the news that my mother, this whole entire time, was suffering with a brain tumor. So she had stage 4 cancer. And the whole time that she was making plans with me, the whole marriage, she was dying. She had a brain tumor. So I don't ever blame my mom for any of the decisions that she's made during that event. But I am really, really glad that she chose to save me rather than leave me there. Because the sad reality is a lot of parents would rather allow their children to rot in reculturing facilities, abuse them because they are European, American, and Canadian children, because you did not have that privilege. I tried to commit suicide 3 times when I was a teenager. Nobody had a clue apart from my closest friends. Even things as mental health, for example, is another issue that within my community, it doesn't exist. Are you depressed? How are you depressed? And then you have the Western world, which wants you to be more like them. And then you want to, but then the Somalian society are saying, actually, no, that's wrong. And the other one is saying that's wrong. So we're lost in the middle, not knowing where we belong, feeling insecure. And I'm not speaking for everybody that looks like me. I'm not speaking for every woman, because everyone's experience is different. But if you grew up in a harmful cultural environment, you will understand exactly what I'm talking about. An environment where you will never get an apology, even if you're a victim of a crime. Rather, you are blamed for the crime that was committed against you. It's really tough, and we need to do a better job at protecting westernized or not. We have a duty of care to these kids and not judge them, for the mistakes that grown-ups adults are making. We need to do a lot better at safeguarding from harmful practices, especially this reculturing practice, because it opens the door for underage marriage, domestic violence, FGM, false imprisonment, kidnapping, even murder. Did you know that American kids are being killed in Somalia? Did you know that? It's absolutely terrifying.